Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading the epic poem Beowulf. This is our part 4 of an 8-part series of this wonderful epic poem written in early English. No one really can decide on when it was written or who wrote it, but it was translated by Burton Raphael. We left off, Beowulf was being heaped with rewards from Horgarth because he had killed Grendel. So he got some gifts, and everybody was celebrating, and the Danes were happy because the Geats, and that was Beowulf. Beowulf lost one man, if you remember, in the battle. Grendel ate him. Anyway, Grendel's dead, and here we go. Thus that guardian of Denmark's treasures had repaid a battle fought for his people, for giving noble gifts. By giving noble gifts, had earned praise for himself from those who try to know truth. Chapter 16. And more, the Lord of Herod ordered treasure gifts for each of the Geats, who sailed with Beowulf and still sat beside him, ancient armor, swords, and for the one murdered by Grendel, gold was carefully paid. Remember, that's the one that Grendel ate. The monster would have murdered again and again had not God and the hero's courage turned fate aside. Then and now men must lie in their Maker's holy hands, moved only as He wills. Our hearts must seek out that will. Put a little arrow there. That's important, because I'm going to reread that again. Then and now. These are epic poems. They're being recited by a third-person narrator in this case, right? It's a third-person narrator. But imagine yourself in the mead hall, and somebody is reciting this. Tales of the ancient heroes and monsters and giants who roam the earth. Even in them, they believe that giants roam the earth. I wonder, I think there's some interesting theories about that. Then and now, men must lie in their Maker's holy hands, moved only as He wills, God. Our hearts must seek out that will. The world, and its long days full of labor, brings good and evil. All who remain here meet both. Keep that in mind. It's an interesting philosophy, good and evil, isn't it? Hrothgar's hall resounded with the harp's high call, with songs and laughter, and the telling of tales, stories sung by the court poet. There's the guy, the court poet. As the joyful Danes drank and listened, seated along their mead benches, he told them of Finn's people. So here comes some tales. I wrote a little note for us. Finn's people, here's a character, attacking Knaf with no warning, half wiping out that Danish tribe, and killing its king. Finn's wife, half sister, learned what good faith was worth to her husband. His honey words and treachery cost her 2 beloved lives, her son and her brother. So Finn's wife, which was Ham's sister, lost her brother and son. Remember, genealogy, and you don't have to be an expert if you want to. You can look up diagrams of who's on first, right, for Beowulf's story. But it's just interesting to listen to the tales. Both falling on spears guided by fate's hand. How she wept. And when morning came, she had reason to mourn, to weep for her slaughtered son, and the bloody corpse of his uncle, both the men she most dearly loved, and whose love she could trust to protect her. But Finn's troops, too, had fallen to the Danish spears. Too few were left to drive the Danes to their death, to force Hanfa's followers, Hengist, to flee the hall where they'd fought, and he stayed. Finn offered them instead more war, words of peace. So instead of war, Finn is offering peace. There would be no victory. They would divide the hall and the throne, half to the Danes and half to Finn's followers. So that battle with Finn and the Danes, half and half, they're going to split it. It's a draw. It's a draw. And when gifts were given, Finn would give Hengst, this guy here, and his soldiers half, and share shining rings, silver and gold, with the Danes, both sides equal, all of them richer, all of their purses heavy, each man's heart warm with the comfort of gold. Remember, these are Vikings. They like their gold. Both sides accepted peace and agreed to it. Finn swore that it with solemn oaths. What wise men had written was his word as well as theirs. He and brave Hengst would live like brothers, and neither leader nor led would break the truce, would talk of evil things. They would remind the Danes that the man that they serve killed Knaf, their lord. They had no king and no choice. And he swore that his sword would silence wagging tongues if Frisian warriors stirred up hatred brought back by the past. So remember, these tribes were always warring, fighting. So now there's a truce between Finn and the Danes. A funeral pyre was prepared and gold was brought. Half's dead body was dressed for burning, and the others with him. Bloody mail shirts could be seen, and golden helmets, some carved with boar heads, all battle-hard, and as useless now as the corpses that they wore them, as corpses that still wore them, soldier after soldier. And then Half's sister, Finn's sad wife, gave her son's body to be burned in the fire, and the flames charring his uncle would consume both kinsmen at once. And then she wept again. And weeping, she sang the dead's last praise. The Danish king was lifted into place, smoke went curling up, logs roared. Pardon me, I'm going to cough. The Danish king was, thank you. Jimmy ate some popcorn before this recording. Shouldn't do that. The Danish king was lifted into place. Smoke went curling up. Logs roared. Open wounds split and burst. Skulls melted. Blood came bubbling down. And the greedy fire demons drank flesh and bones from the dead of both sides until nothing was left. Use your imagination now to see. They burned bodies, right, on these funeral pyres. Chapter 17. Still the story, right? Finn released a few of his soldiers and allowed them to return to their distant towns and estates. Hengst lived the whole stormy winter through. There was Finn, whom he hated, but his heart lived in Denmark, which he and the other survivors could not visit, could not sail to, as long as the wind-whipped sea crashed and whirled, or while winter's cold hands froze the water hard, tied it in icy knots. So he's kind of trapped on the land there because it's winter. They would wait for the new year, for spring to come following the sun, melting the old year away and reopening the ocean. Winter was over, and the earth grew lovely, and Hengst dreamed of his home. But revenge came first, settling his bitter feud with Finn, whose bloody sword he could never forget. He planned, he waited. Now, remember, these guys had signed a truce, right? Everybody divided everything half and half. Wolf plans and waited until the Danish warrior dropped a sword in his lap, a weapon Finn and his men remembered and feared. Remember, the weapons are important. They have names. They're famous swords. And the time had come. And Hengst rose, hearing the Danes murmur, and drove his new sword into Finn's belly, butchering that king under his own roof. And the Danes rose, their hearts full of Finn's treachery. And the misery he brought them, their sword arms restless and eager, and the hall they shared with their enemies ran red with enemy blood, and bodies rolled on the floor besides Finn. They took the queen, they looted everything they could find that belonged to her dead husband, and they loaded their ships with rings and necklaces and shining jewels, wonderfully worked. It's beautiful. They like their jewelry, right? Shining jewels, wonderfully worked, and sailed, bringing treasure and a willing captive to the land that she left and had longed for, alone no longer. The singer finished his song. So this is the song that was being told to the Vikings, right? His listeners laughed and drank, and their pleasure loud in the hall. And the cupbearers hurried with their sparkling vessels. And then the queen, Withlow, remember, Hrothgar's wife, wearing her bright crown, appeared among them. And then came Hrothgar and Hrothulf, his nephew. Seated peacefully together, their friendship and Hrothulf's good faith still unbroken. And Ufreth sat at Hrothgar's feet, and everyone trusted him. Remember, this is the big mouth. Remember, he was mocking Beowulf. He didn't believe Beowulf had courage. Believed in his courage, although he spilled his relative's blood. And then Withrow spoke. Accept this cup, my lord and king. May happiness come to the Danes' great ring-giver. May the Geats receive mild words from your mouth, words that they have earned. Let gifts flow freely from your open hands. Treasure your armies that you have brought you from all over the world, because I have heard that the greatest of the Geats, now rests in your heart like a son. Who's that? Beowulf, right? Herod stands purged, restored by his strength. Celebrate his courage, rejoice, be generous, while a kingdom sits in your palm, and a people in a power that death will steal. But your sons will be safe, sheltered in Hrothgar's gracious protection. If fate takes their father while Hrothgar is alive, I know your nephew's kindness. I know that he'll repay in kind the goodness that you have shown him. Support your two sons as you and I sustained him in his own early days, his father dead and he but a boy. And then she walked to the bench where Herrick and Hormund, those are the two young sons, her two sons sat together. Herrick, Hrothgar. Beowulf, prince of the Geats, sat between them. Crossing the hall, she sat quietly at their side. Everybody seems to be getting along pretty good, huh? They brought a foaming cup and offered it to Beowulf. A foaming cup means ale, right? It was taken and given in friendship. And he was given a mail shirt, that's an armored shirt, and golden armbands, and the most beautiful necklace known to men. Nowhere in any treasure hoard, anywhere on earth, was there anything like it. Not since Hama carried the bristling necklace home to his glorious city. There's another story. You can look that up if you like. But you don't have to know what that is, but somebody carried a beautiful necklace and saved its tight carved jewels and his skin and his soul from Emmeric's treachery. So there's another name. And then came to God. In other words, he got religion. Hillick had it next. Sweatering's grandson, defending the golden hoard, his battle-hard hands had won for him. The Geats' proud king lost it, was carried away by fate when too much pride made him feud with the Frisians. Remember that? That was part of the story we heard before. He had asked for misery, and it was granted to him. He'd borne those precious stones on a ship's broad back, and he fell beneath his shield. His body and his shining coat of mail and that necklace all lay for the Franks, this is a Germanic tribe, to pluck, for jackal warriors to find when they walked through the rows of corpses. Geats and their king lay slaughtered everywhere that the robbers looked. So they're always fighting. These people are always fighting. The warriors shouted, and Wethlo spoke, "Wear these bright jewels, beloved Beowulf, and enjoy them and the rings and the gold. O fortunate young warrior, grow richer, and let your fame and your strength go hand in hand, and lend these two boys your wise and gentle heart." Talking about her sons. "I'll remember your kindness. Your glory is too great to forget. It will last forever. Wherever the earth is surrounded by the sea, the winds home as waves lap at its walls, and be happy for as long as you live." What a great toast. Be happy as long as you live. Your good fortune warms my soul. Spread your blessed protection across my son and my king's son. All men speak softly, ears speak mildly, and trust their neighbors. Protect their lord, our loyal followers who would fight as joyfully as they drink. And may your heart help you do as I ask. She returned to her seat. The soldiers ate and drank like kings. The savage fate decreed for them hung dark and unknown. What would follow after nightfall, when Hrothgar withdrew from the hall, sought his bed and left his soldiers to theirs? Heorot would house a host of men that night, as it had been meant to do, and they stacked away the benches and spread out blankets and pillows. See, they didn't have separate, little houses and cottages. They all did this in the same room, one big mead hall, M-E-A-D hall. But those beer-drinking sleepers lay down with death beside their beds. What's that? Uh-oh. Ladies and gentlemen, what's that? What do you call that? What do you call that? They lay down with death beside their beds. That's foreshadowing, right? They slept with their shining shields at the edge of their pillows. The hall was filled with helmets hanging near motionless heads. Spears stood by their hands. Their hammered mail shirts covered their chests. It was the Danes' custom to be ready for war wherever they rested. At home or in foreign lands, at their lord's quick call if he needed them, if trouble came to their king, and they knew how soldiers must live. Be prepared. Remember the Boy Scouts model? Be prepared. So they're prepared at the moment they need to be called. Chapter 19. They sank into sleep. The price of that evening's rest was too high for the Dane who bought it with his life, paying as others had paid when Grendel inhabited Heorot the hall, his until his crimes pulled him into hell. So they're talking, read that again. The price of that evening's rest was too high for the Dane, that Dane who bought it with his life, paying as others had paid when Grendel inhabited Heorot. So when Grendel used to eat people, right? And now, here we go. Uh-oh. And now it was known that a monster had died, but a monster still lived and meant revenge. She brooded on her loss. Misery had brewed in her heart. That female horror, Grendel's mother, living in the murky, cold lake assigned her since Cain had killed his only brother, slain his father's son with an angry sword. God drove him off, outlawed him to the dry and barren desert, and branded him with a murderer's mark. And he bore a race of fiends, accursed like their father. So Grendel was drawn to Heorot. An outcast come to meet the man who awaited him, and he snatched at Beowulf's arm, but that prince remembered God's grace and the strength that he'd given him and relied on the Lord for all the help, the comfort and support he would need. And he killed the monster as God had meant him to do. So he's telling the story again of Beowulf, right? tore the fiend apart, and forced him to run as rapidly as he could towards death-cold waiting hands. Towards death. Isn't that beautiful? Towards death's cold waiting hands. His mother's sad heart and her greed drove her from her den on the dangerous pathway of revenge. Revenge is always, that's an interesting word, right? Revenge. Do you know that I think Confucius is the one who said that if you're going to partake in revenge and you go on a revenge, make sure you dig two graves, one for the person you want to have revenge on and your own. I want you to think about this. So now we find out Grendel had a mom, Grendel's mother, and she's ticked off now, right? Because now her son is dead, Grendel's dead. So now she's on a pathway of revenge. And so she reached Herat, where the Danes slept as though already dead, and her visit ended their good fortune, reversed the bright vein of their good luck, of their luck. No female, no matter how fierce, could have come with a man's strength, fought with the power and courage men fight with, smashing their shining swords, their bloody, hammered forged blades onto boar-headed helmets. Remember how they described their helmets with boar heads on them? Slashing and stabbing with the sharpest of points. The soldiers raised their shields and drew those gleaming swords, and they swung them above the piled benches, that leaving their mail shirts and their helmets where they'd lain when the terror took hold of them. And to save her life, she moved still faster, took a single victim, and fled from the hall. Running to the moors, discovered but her supper assured, sheltered in her dripping claws, she had taken Hrothgar's closest friend, the man that he most loved of all the men on earth, and she killed a glorious soldier, cut a noble life short. No Geat could have stopped her. Beowulf and his band had been given better beds. Sleep had come to them in a different hall. So this hall is so big, it's got compartments, right? So they're not even in there, but she comes in and she whips up and she grabs Hrothgar's closest friend. She carried off, and then all the Herat burst into shouts. She had carried off Grendel's claw. Sorrow had returned to Denmark. They traded deaths, Danes and monsters, and no one had won. Both had lost. The wise old king trembled in anger and grief, and his dearest friend and advisor was dead. Beowulf was sent for at once, and a messenger went swiftly to his rooms and brought him. He came, his band about him, as dawn was breaking through, the best of all warriors, walking to where Hrothgar sat waiting, the gray-haired king wondering if God could ever end this misery. The Geats tramped quickly through the hall, and their steps beat and echoed in the silence. Beowulf rehearsed the words that he would want with Hrothgar. And he asked the Danes' great lord if all were at peace, and if the night passed quietly. Hrothgar answered him, chapter 20, protector of his people. Hrothgar says, there's no happiness to ask about. Anguish has descended on the Danes. Esher is dead. Emroth's older brother and my own most trusted counselor and friend, my comrade. When we went into battle, who'd beaten back the enemy's swords, standing by my side, all my soldiers should be as he was, their hearts as brave and as wise. Another wandering fiend has found him in Herat and murdered him, fled with his corpse. He'll be eaten and his flesh become a horrible feast. And who knows where the beast may be hiding? Its belly stuffed full. She's taking revenge for your victory over Grendel. She, Grendel's mom, right? For your strength, your mighty grip, and that monster's death. For years, He'd been preying on my people, Grendel. And you came, and he was dead in a single day. And now there's another one, a second hungry fiend, determined to avenge the first, a monster willing, more able to bring us more sorrow, or so it must seem, to the many men mourning that noble treasure giver. For all men were treated. We're going to stop there. This is the fourth reading. And now we got another fiend, another monster on our hands. It's Grendel's mom. Oh my gosh. So Beowulf is being told that this is what happened. He just killed Hrothgar's, beloved friend. You've been reading with Jimmy. This is part 4 of an 8-part reading of the epic poem Beowulf. I'd like you to learn more by watching and reading more videos, parts 5, 6, 7, and 8. And be sure to visit and read other classics with Jimmy on the website. If you got a question, email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. And now we have Grendel's mother to fight. Oh, will Beowulf fight her? Will he enlist the other Geats? Will he enlist the Geats and the Danes? I wonder what will happen. Be careful. Stay focused.